Made with spoken.
Chapter 1. Star's Blessing. Loran's fingers trembled as he fumbled with the prayer beads, their smooth surface slipping against his clammy skin. The air inside the sanctum was thick with the scent of burning incense, a heady mix of frankincense and myrrh that made his eyelids droop. Around him the other acolytes knelt in perfect rows, their white robes pristine and unwrinkled, their chants rising in unison like a hymn of pure devotion. He hated them, not for their faith, not even for their discipline, but for how they made it all look so easy. "Loran," whispered a voice behind him, soft but sharp enough to make him flinch. "Focus, the High Cleric is watching." Loran cast a furtive glance over his shoulder. Aldrich, the golden boy of the Order, knelt a few feet away. Even now, in the dim light of the sanctum, Aldrich's features seemed to glow. His sharp jawline, his piercing blue eyes, the effortless way he held himself as though the goddess herself had sculpted him. Aldrich didn't need to whisper the reminder. He didn't need to try. The High Cleric probably thought Aldrich's prayers could heal the sick and part the seas. Loran gritted his teeth and forced himself to mumble the verses. The words tasted bitter on his tongue. He barely understood half of them, and the other half felt like hollow syllables. The High Cleric's gaze swept over the room, lingering just long enough that Loran felt the weight of it pressing on his neck like a brand. The chant ended, and the acolytes rose as one. Loran's knees cracked as he stood, the ache a familiar reminder of hours spent kneeling on cold stone. Beside him, Aldrich moved with the grace of a deer, his robes flowing like water. Loran straightened awkwardly, brushing non-existent dust from his own robes, which were slightly too short and patched at the hem. "Your movements lack reverence, Loran," the High Cleric said, his voice cutting through the silence. Heat flooded Loran's face. "Yes, Your Grace," he mumbled, bowing deeply. He could feel the other acolytes' eyes on him, their judgment as palpable as the incense in the air. As they filed out of the sanctum, Aldrich fell into step beside him. "You've been slipping lately," Aldrich said, his tone gentle but tinged with concern. "Are you sleeping well?" Loran forced a laugh. "As well as anyone can in the dormitories. You know how it is, snoring, creaking bunks." Aldrich frowned but didn't press further. That was the thing about Aldrich. He was too kind, too understanding. It made Loran's resentment burn all the hotter. The corridors of the Holy Citadel were dim and cool, the stone walls etched with murals of Lumina, the goddess of light, vanquishing the demon lord in an explosion of radiant fire. Loran's gaze flicked to the murals as they passed, the stories they told as familiar to him as his own name. For centuries, the Holy Order had defended the land from the remnants of the demon lord's followers, a sacred duty passed down through generations. A duty that Loran was failing. He wasn't strong like Aldrich. He wasn't brilliant like Theon or compassionate like Alina. He was just mediocre. And in the Holy Order, mediocrity was a sin. That night, Loran sat on his narrow cot, staring at the parchment of his latest magical aptitude test. The red ink bled across the page like an open wound. Unsatisfactory. He crumpled the parchment and threw it across the room. It landed with a soft rustle, joining the growing pile of failures in the corner. His chest felt tight, his breaths shallow. He couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep clawing his way through each day, only to fall further behind. The door creaked open. Loran's head snapped up, his heart pounding. A hooded figure slipped inside, their steps silent as a shadow. The figure paused, glancing around before pulling back their hood to reveal a weathered face, marked by deep lines and piercing gray eyes. "I hear you're looking for a way to even the odds," the stranger said, their voice low and gravelly. Loran's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" "Call me a friend." The stranger reached into their cloak and produced a small vial filled with shimmering blue powder. "This is Star's Blessing, a rare herb gifted by the stars themselves. It unlocks one's true potential." Loran stared at the vial, the powder inside catching the faint moonlight streaming through the window. It seemed to pulse, as though alive. "Why would you give this to me?" The stranger smiled, a thin, sharp curve of their lips. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in seeing you succeed." Suspicion warred with desperation in Loran's mind. And the cost? Consider it a gift. The stranger pressed the vial into Loran's hand, their fingers cold as ice. But remember, gifts often come with expectations. Before Loran could respond, the stranger slipped back into the shadows, leaving nothing but the faint scent of iron in their wake. Loran stared at the vial for what felt like hours. The powder seemed to whisper to him, its glow intensifying whenever his resolve wavered. He thought of Aldrich, of the High Cleric's disapproving gaze, of the endless cycle of failure that defined his life. With trembling hands, he uncorked the vial and poured the powder into a cup of water. It dissolved instantly, the liquid turning a vivid azure. He hesitated, his reflection staring back at him from the surface of the liquid. What would Lumina think of him now? Did it even matter? He drank. The fever struck almost immediately. Loran collapsed onto his cot, his body racked with violent tremors. His skin burned as though molten fire coursed through his veins, and his vision swam with colors too vivid, too alien. He saw flashes of light, heard voices speaking in languages he couldn't comprehend. The room twisted and stretched, the walls bending like they were alive. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Loran lay there, gasping for air, his body drenched in sweat. His heart pounded in his chest, but the tightness he'd felt earlier was gone. In its place was something new, something electric. He clenched his fists, and for the first time, he felt power coursing through him. The world seemed sharper, clearer. He noticed the faint cracks in the ceiling, the distant sound of footsteps echoing in the corridors. He sat up, his movements fluid, effortless. The crumpled parchment on the floor caught his eye. He reached out and, without thinking, muttered a spell. The parchment floated into the air and smoothed itself out, the red ink fading until the page was blank. Loran stared at his hands, a slow grin spreading across his face. For the first time in his life, he felt like more than just a failure. The next day, the transformation was undeniable. During the morning sparring session, Loran moved with a speed and precision that left his peers gaping. His magical aptitude test that afternoon was flawless, the instructors murmuring in astonishment as he conjured complex sigils with ease. Even Aldrich seemed impressed. "I don't know what's changed, but you're different," he said, slapping Loran on the back. "Keep it up." Loran smiled, but inside a storm brewed. The power was intoxicating, yes, but it was borrowed. A gift from a stranger with unknown motives. And gifts, as the stranger had said, often came with expectations. As the sun set over the citadel, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Loran stood on the balcony of the dormitories, staring out at the horizon. The weight of the vial's empty glass in his pocket felt heavier than ever. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, soft, insidious, and impossible to ignore. "This is only the beginning.